Today is all about our role as the voice of the profession. We're going to begin with a celebration of our litigation magazine. We have a lot of wonderful people down here in these front four tables. If there is one thing that distinguishes our section over the last 40 years, it is our publications, and more importantly, our flagship publication, the Litigation Magazine. You've seen blow-ups of some of the significant issues over the years out in the hallways. The magazine is our most consistent voice. It is our most visible benefit. It is also, for these who sit here, a labor of love. Today I want to begin a celebration of the magazine that will extend for a year, and we've asked our current editorial board to meet with us, and we've also asked the past editors-in-chief to be our special guests. You'll get to meet them. We have an enormous number of them here, and they honor us with their presence. I believe it's real important that we do this today. Some of my first days in section leadership were at dinners with this group. There was never a dull moment at dinner. They were a lot of fun to be with. They were accepting, and I really love that about them, and I love that about the section. So often the work they do in planning the magazine goes unnoticed because they are meeting while we are meeting. And so they don't get to they may be at our meeting, but they're not at the meeting. And so I think it's important for each of us to get to know them, to appreciate the enormous volume of work they do, and to thank them for their service. Today's celebration is really the brainchild of Steve Miller, aided by our own talented Monica Buckley. Steve is a managing partner of Miller, Goler, Vegas, and Lapine. He's a trial lawyer, a litigator, and a strategic counselor to public and private companies and government agencies. He has been on the editorial board of the magazine for 30 years, and he serves on the board of directors of the Museum of Contemporary Art. In law school, he was a protege of Jim McElhaney. Steve, come and guide us through today's celebration.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you so much for having us. It is an absolute joy for us to be together again. It's so meaningful, and it is an incredible thrill for us to be together with all of you. We, the editors of Litigation Journal, are proud of the work that we do. We love our publication. Most of the time, we love each other. We appreciate the unique role that the journal plays in the section, in the life of the section, and in the life of the profession. Litigation is our friend, our colleague, our mentor, and our conscience. We know our profession, and we know ourselves and our relationship and role in the profession better, deeper, and more profoundly because of Litigation Journal. And time after time, lawyers turn back to revisit what Litigation Journal said and says for the guidance that Litigation Journal gives to all of us. Section members repeatedly tell you and us, informally and formally, that they eagerly await the arrival of the journal, that they have their individual favorite points of entry, that they read those right away, that they linger and savor the rest of the book when it arrives, and that they keep rather than discard the issues and never are done with them. The editorial board of Litigation Journal today includes some but not all former editors-in-chief. And I ask that today the current editors, including those from the former ranks of the editors-in-chief who put out the publication, stand so that we all can recognize you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please don't become uncomfortable. The house lights will drop. Ladies and gentlemen, our friend and yours, Litigation Journal. Litigation Journal began with Charlie Wilson in 1973. This morning we welcome Doug Khanna, Litigation's second editor-in-chief, to remember Charlie, their work together, and the launch of the journal.
Wowie zowie, how can I follow that? One of the great joys of my life has been, looking back, has been to have participated in the creation and the development of this great publication. I'm the only person in this room who can say that he was present at the creation, and I'm one of it's probably on one hand the number of people who are still standing who can say that. So in 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, I'm going to give you a little thumbnail history of how it all started. It was early 1973, and I was in my office in Baltimore, and the phone rang. And on the other end of the line was Charlie Wilson from Williams and Connolly, my old Columbia Journalism School classmate. We were both lawyers now, but we'd both been in the trenches of daily journalism for several years, grinding out copy on deadlines and in smoke-filled newsrooms with loud, clattering manual typewriters. And Charlie said to me, "I've got a gig to tell you about. I've been assigned to create a lawyer's publication, a journal for the brand new section of litigation. It's going to be a quarterly journal, they call it, but what I want to do is to create a magazine that lawyers will actually read, something that'll get up off the floor and fly." He said, I want to recruit editors who know good writing from bad and who can turn bad writing into good. I want articles that are practical. I want a good visual style, nice graphics, art. I want a magazine. I don't want a footnote-filled law review. You want to get on? And by now my tongue is hanging out, you know. So I said, yes, I will, yes. And so it came to pass that exactly 40 years ago, in the late spring of 73, about a half a dozen of us met in Chicago at the old ABA headquarters down in Hyde Park, and we were gonna figure out how to do it. So Charlie comes in, and we learned that he's already figured out how to do it. He says, "Okay, guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a magazine. It's going to have themes. The content is the thematic content is going to be bracketed by regular features, like from the bench, like we'll get a judge to write that every quarter, like opening statement for the section chairman." Like legal lore, we'll get a nice historical piece of literature all about trials. I want a column that treats courtroom practice and tells people how to act in court. We'll call that something like Back to Basics. And so we set about basically trying to plan the content of the first few issues. And now it's noon, and another tradition started. The door opened, and the bar rolled in for the pre-lunch cocktail hour. What I want to stress is that there's only one father of this magazine, and it was Charlie Wilson. The rest of us were basically passengers on the train, and we did our work, and we did it well, but we always knew who the boss was, and we always knew who ran the show. He's the one who got it past the ABA publications bureaucracy, which was very, very skeptical of this venture. This is not going to be serious. Nobody's going to take this seriously. You know, he had to fight to get the weight of the paper correctly, the typography. The ABA didn't want anything to do with that. So it was all Charlie Wilson. And when the magazine finally hit the streets, as we said, in those days, it was a huge success. And so much so that I remember people were calling Charlie and saying, well, that was fabulous. That first issue's fabulous, but what can you do for an encore? How are you going to follow that up? Well, history shows that. So, as I say, I was just a passenger on the train, but there is one thing I want to brag on, because I do have one accomplishment that I'm really proud of, and that is having recruited for the board my old friend and law professor it's funny, he was meant to be an associate editor who would find a different trial lawyer every quarter to write the, quote, back to basics column. But Jim McElhenney, when he said yes to that job, he had in mind a different idea, and he ended up writing them all himself. He's the only person in the history of the magazine that was an author in every issue we had up until the time he stopped 25 or 30 years later. So that's my claim to fame, to have recruited Jim McElhenney and to have been a talent spotter. I'll bring that to the present day. I also recruited my law partner, Maria Rodriguez, who's our immediate past editor-in-chief, and my fellow Baltimorean, Robin West, who's the current editor-in-chief. So that's my accomplishment, and I'm proud of it. Thanks very much.
After the first decade, which was dominated, absolutely dominated, by Charlie as the founder and the original editorial board, it was time to turn the reins over to a new generation, the first of whom brought her own perspective, her own vision, and her own strength and determination. She is Litigation Journal's 8th editor-in-chief, Jean McLean Snyder.
I came aboard Litigation magazine through Jim McElhenney. Soon after I graduated law school in 1979, I took a trial advocacy course from him. When that was done, he said, "Say, how'd you like to write an article for Litigation Journal?" I said, "That sounds great." I had a good time. Jim had a good time. Article was published, and he said to me, "Say, how'd you like to come onto the board of Litigation magazine?" I said, "That sounds great." And I did that. In 1984, I joined the board. Jim then became editor-in-chief, and as Steve said, with his keeping up yet, his uninterrupted line of columns. And after I'd been on the board for a couple of months or a year, Jim said to me, "Say, how'd you like to become editor-in-chief?" And I said, "No, that's not a good idea for me, Jim." I said, "I'm up for partner at my firm next year, and all my energies are going to be directed there." Okay, so Bart Schwartz became editor-in-chief, and a few months later, I made partner at my firm, and Bart didn't. So he, not at my firm, but he was up at his firm. So he left, and I took over. In that funny circumstance, and by the way, I was the first woman ever to be editor-in-chief of Litigation magazine. Okay. You know, I used to put that on my resume, but I stopped because to me it just sounded so old-fashioned. There's no more first women anymore. We're way beyond that. But anyway, when I took over, several interesting things happened that I'll tell folks about when we pulled the bar in before lunch. But there was one significant change that I made. I said, from now on, folks, the lawyer is not just a man. No more the lawyer he, the lawyer he, the lawyer he. Somehow, and it's not, takes a little thoughtfulness, but we got to go away from that. And so I'm very proud to see that the tradition continues and that the authors work their way through it by he or she, or plural, or repeating the noun, or using fiction names, but no longer, except occasionally, is an article, how the young lawyer takes his first deposition. Let's hope that is a no-no. I stayed on at the section and chaired the first Woman Advocate Committee. Now every bar association in the country has a woman-oriented committee, but we were the first. The section was the first. It was spectacular happening, as Lorna remembers. Kim Askew was part of it. I think Eileen Letts was also. And I saw a lot of ups and downs with this section in terms of monies, membership, and so on. And we always maintain the magazine as the intact, spectacular publication that it is. My oral argument on that point has been made by the folks you've heard and by this visual presentation here. I heard it suggested yesterday that the magazine be run by the mantra, cheaper, faster, better. And I hope you folks will think long and hard about that. This is the publication the most wonderful publication that goes to every member. And we don't want to chip away at what is wonderful about that. I know the current editors are committed to keeping it great, and I'm sure you folks will be too.
The content and editorial style are not litigation's only distinctive attribute. They are as well its absolutely unique look and its terrifically special feel. The special feel came for most of its life from litigation's heavy textured paper, and with our recent redesign, litigation still presents itself with heft and significance. The unique look was defined for much of its life by two absolutely brilliant artists, a gifted young designer, Michael Weitzman, and a truly talented visual artist, our dear, dear friend, Will Park. For insight and memories about Will, we turn to our 15th editor-in-chief, the Honorable Jeffrey Cole, and our 13th editor-in-chief, the esteemed Lawrence Filardo.
Well, Larry and I would like to share our memories of Bill Park with you. He changed his name to Will, and Larry, being a better and more a better person than I, called him Will. I never could call him Will. To me, he was Bill Park, and that's how I've always referred to him. Larry will share with you some personal memories of him, and I'd like to focus on simply what I thought was his extraordinary contribution to this magazine. You saw, I think, from the presentation that was made on the board what Bill's covers were like. Some of them are outside, and they really are matchless. As I think Steve said, it was on the board, the inaugural edition of Litigation appeared in 1975, and on the screen was a legend that said the folks recognized that they had to have a very distinctive look. Content alone was not going to be the selling point for the magazine. Charlie Wilson really was inspired, and so were the people he brought with him. They recognized that there was a feel to the magazine and a look and a style that came before the content. And if you couldn't get people to be mesmerized by the initial look, you weren't going to get to the content, or at least not as dramatically. And so the avowed objective of the magazine, as they said in the first edition in 1975, was to create a journal that would be distinctive in appearance, style, and content. And the theme of the first issue was manners and morals at the bar, lawyers and accountants on trial. On the cover, and I don't remember if this was on there, was a picture of a really fearsome judge. I mean, a scary-looking guy with a picture of, behind it, a tattered American flag. Now, we know that the magazine was an instant success, but I suspect it wasn't because of that first cover. There were a series of covers that were somewhat indescript or nondescript, and then within the first few issues, they found Bill Park. And from the moment of his first cover, litigation really took flight, and it became what it is today. It was an extraordinary, extraordinary thing. He brought wit and wisdom and style and grace and a feel and an artistic creativity that I think is really quite unmatched. All of the lawyers and judges whom I know, peripherally or well, have saved every issue of the magazine they got. It was really something to be treasured and looked forward to. And when the magazine came, it was really an arresting event. People stopped what they were doing. They wanted to look at the cover and savor it. And then they immediately were drawn to the inside. Bill's covers always were thematic. They always worked, although in hindsight one wonders sometimes how they really worked, but they did. He had a real feel. My favorite is actually out there, and it's the one with the alligators. And the theme of the issue was prejudice. And I said, well, here, do what you want. And no one, well, Larry will tell you a little bit differently, but Bill was always the initial originator of the theme and the feel and the sense of it. And he sent me this cover, and maybe it was a reflection of me. I'm not quite sure. But on the cover were 11 or 12 alligators of varying descriptions. They were men, they were women. He was wonderful about being gender neutral. And they all had a different look. Some were hateful, some were captious, some were disdaining. And then out in the back, coming into the room, was this tiny little white sheep with this angelic look, carrying a little briefcase with big glasses, and the alligators wouldn't look at him. And he had this look of absolutely uncomprehending sadness. For whatever reason, that issue has always struck me. That issue was typical of what Bill Park did. The covers were colorful and whimsical and inspired and always so smart. If you folks who saved them go back, I promise you will see in those covers something today that you didn't see the first time that you looked. And if you go back the day after, you will see something different. There was always something hidden. It was like seeing a movie, a great movie, the second or third time. You saw things that you did not see. He was not the voice, but the face of the magazine for some 30 years. I don't think that litigation would have become and would have continued to be what it became and what it was without Bill Park's contribution. He was really a brilliant artist. But perhaps more important than that were his personal qualities, and Larry can talk to you about that. He was really a lovely, lovely human being. I never heard him say a bad word about anybody in all the years that I knew him. It really was quite maddening, and for me at least, it made me feel bad. I was always saying bad things about somebody in my head. And Bill Park just looked at the world as a gracious Christian human being. That's what he was. He was very spiritual and very religious. Everybody was good, and everybody was decent. He would he would go to jail to play chess with inmates. He was doing always philanthropic things. He was really a great fellow. His last cover was the spring of 2011. But for everything there is a season, and there was for this. Tastes and times change, and Will has moved on, and we as a magazine have moved on with a different approach to things. Is one better or worse? I don't know. It's a question of time and taste. But I feel confident in saying to you that the magazine that we have today and that Doug talked so fondly about never would have become what it was without Bill Park's contribution.
That's terrific.
We could not have this celebration of Litigation Magazine without a segment devoted to Will Park. When I became an associate editor of Litigation, I learned very quickly how important he was to the magazine. I would tell people I was an associate editor of Litigation Magazine, and I would get one of two reactions. Either one, oh, the one with the covers, or two, a look of puzzlement, and I would say, the one with the covers. And everyone would know what I was talking about. He really added a dimension to the magazine that was, in addition to the content, of course, is what we editors like to think is the important part. But it's not what people remembered us for. They remembered us for the covers. And when I think of Will, I think of not just his artistic talent, but his imagination. And Jeff talked a little bit about that. But every one of the covers made you think. And most of the covers were Will's ideas. But he also had a remarkable sense of humility and an ability to take other people's ideas and put them into print, into a picture that really told the story. And one of my favorite litigation stories was the cover that he drew for the Tomorrow issue. I was the editor-in-chief when the clock turned from 1999 to 2000. And I was excited about that, and the reason I was so excited is because I thought it would be terrific to have a theme of yesterday for the last issue of 1999 and a theme of tomorrow for the first issue of 2000. And so we did that. And I said to Will, for yesterday, I want you to think of a cover that conveys that. And he drew a marvelous cover. It's a caveman judge with a big club on his stone desk. There is a caveman lawyer and a cavewoman lawyer arguing in the foreground. There is cave art on an easel, that's the exhibit, and a forlorn-looking caveman on the witness stand. Terrific cover. So tomorrow comes, and Will draws a cover that had young lawyers with briefcases shooting through space. And it just didn't do it for me. I wasn't crazy about it. It wasn't the excitement that I wanted. So I called him up and I said, I'm not crazy about it. He said, let's sleep on it. I went for a walk with my daughter that night, and she was 10 years old. And as we were walking, she could see there was something troubling her dad. And she says, what's on your mind? And I told her, I said, I'm trying to think of an idea for this cover. We walked a few more steps, and she says, you know what would be really cool, Daddy? If he did the same cover that he did for the cavemen, only he did it with robots and astronauts in the future. I said, brilliant. I called Will the next morning. I said, I've got an idea. I'm not going to tell you whose idea it is until you tell me what you think. And I told him, and he said, terrific. I don't care whose idea it is. I said it was my 10-year-old daughter's. He says even better. And he drew an absolutely marvelous cover with an exhibit hovering in space and the same idea of the astronaut man and astronaut woman lawyer arguing in the foreground, an alien for a judge, and a robot with different visual monitors streaming all over the place, watching the courtroom from the witness stand. Will was a humble man. He was a brilliant man, and he was a terrific artist. And we all owe him a great debt for making Litigation Magazine what it is. Thanks.
That was terrific. Absolutely terrific. That concept of humility is real, and it extends to us as any group that puts out a publication called a magazine or a journal. We know that some people who receive it read the words, and some people just look at the pictures. While litigation has a distinctive editorial style, it accommodates and presents many special literary voices. Three voices who were not editors-in-chief are among those that you and we and our readership truly have loved and appreciated through the decades. Peter Baird. Peter's passing pained us, and we miss him and his warmth and his humor terribly even today. We also miss his magic, both literal, the magic acts he performed, and figuratively, the magic of his insights and his words. Peter's work appeared nearly 20 times in litigation and included these wonderful titles: How Lawyers Lose Their Way, A Lawyer's Letter to His Son, My Stupid Mistakes, and Bedside Manner for Lawyers. Jake Stein. Jake's work was published nearly 40 times in Litigation Journal, including such timeless wonders as Procrastination, Believe Me, It Happened, I Was There, Keep Your Big Mouth Shut, The Judge Hates Me, and Liars Don't Always Lose. Rob Shapiro. Rob, who is very much still with us and working, though not here this weekend because he was in court for a TRO, has produced 60 pieces in litigation and is still growing strong, including among them Wrestling with the Discovery Demons, Can a Litigator Be a Problem Solver, For the Love of Knowledge, and Looking Through the Wrong End of the Telescope. And then there are beloved and prolific voices who were editors-in-chief. Jeffrey Cole. Jeff's work already has appeared 25 times, and he's not done. His insightful interviews and his thoughtful explorations of the finer points of evidence, procedure, and strategy include these wonders: Lessons Discovered Along the Way, Jilting the Judge, How to Make and Survive a Motion to Disqualify, and one that has to be everybody's favorite just for the title and the author combination, Reversing the Magistrate Judge by the Magistrate Judge. Two other beloved and prolific voices who were editors-in-chief are Jim McElhaney, whose work appeared 130 times, and Ken Nolan, whose essays number 50 and counting, including Losing, Get Used to It. No, they really don't like us. Hubris, Lies We Tell Ourselves, Screwing Up. For thoughts about Jim McElhaney and Ken Nolan, we turn to our 11th editor-in-chief, Mark Neubauer.
Well, great magazines have great voices. And yes, you heard about two of them, Jim McElhaney and Ken Nolan. And before I embarrass Ken, if you could stand and be acknowledged. Let me first begin with a trivia riddle about Jim McElhaney. What do Jim McElhaney, William Rehnquist, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and yours truly have in common? If you don't know the answer, we both come from the same small village in Wisconsin called Charwood. We had the same English teacher. And two of those students followed her admonition to actually make something of themselves. Jim carried that Midwest upbringing through his columns. Constantly in editorial board meetings, he would admonish us, write for the lawyer in Dubuque, and write he did. His columns were the most popular feature for over a quarter of a century in litigation. Tens of thousands of lawyers followed him religiously to learn his tricks of the trade as his character brought his bag from Agnes, bringing out tricks of how to be a great trial lawyer. Jim's columns became the most successful book of this section, Trial Notebook. Indeed, Jim made litigation and litigation made Jim. He became a popular speaker, a prominent educator of trial tactics throughout his career here with the magazine. Following him appropriately is my good friend Ken. Ken did not bring that Midwest sensibility, but the streetwise of Brooklyn, New York. But he wrote also for the common lawyer, the working lawyer. He wrote not for the silk stockings of Foley Square, but the Scrabble courtrooms of Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Queens. But he brought the same sensibility to his columns, writing for the good lawyer, the working lawyer, giving common sense training to lawyers, which has been the framework of litigation throughout its publication. Ken, too, followed Jim in one more way. A collection of his columns is now published in the newest release from the litigation section, Streetwise Litigator. And make sure you try to get a copy. And like Lauren, it's a great gift for young lawyers and, frankly, for ourselves. So Ken and Jim are two of the singularly great voices of this magazine. Now, since they were stupid enough to allow me to have a mic, I want to add a personal note. Besides my wife and 5 daughters, the greatest thing that happened to my life is being a member of this board and this publication. It's difficult to tell people that you have 24 lawyers around the country who meet 2 weekends a year, and these become your very best friends, better than the friends you have in your own local communities. And not only do you become friends, your spouses become friends, your children become friends. It's just an incredible experience. And I have 2 words to tell you for giving me this great gift. Thank you.
We're not bashful about editing each other's work. I would just say, not really friends, family. Family. We welcome the redesign. We appreciated the opportunity to engage in it, and we are very proud of how it sustains the remarkable Litigation Journal brand and improves on it. Thank you, Hillary Bass, and all those who worked on it and made it happen. 2 other huge acknowledgments go to the dedicated work of 2 publishing professionals at the section, Monica Buckley and Scott Lewis. We love you and we thank you. Come on up, guys. You're not getting a gift, but you're going to help give a gift.
Yay for us.
Let's bring them out. In honor of the editors-in-chief, we have created a wonderful and elegant memento for each of them. A gift from the section to commemorate their tireless work and their extraordinary leadership. Every editor and every author knows that that's the biggest challenge in the world, the blank page. I'll tell you in advance, we thank Jill Teddams for your terrific design work in helping us bring to life Bill Bay's initial idea and our refinement and edit of it. My friends, each of you will receive your full-size gift at home, where we hope you frame it and display it with the happiness of receiving it that we have in sending it. Monica and Scott, let's please share this special memento. And now, as we call each of your names, please join us and accept a small replica here of the gift that you'll receive at home. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll ask you to do us one courtesy, and that is please hold your applause until the end so that we all together can express our appreciation and our respect. Bill, would you join me? Yeah. Here you go. Come on up. No, they're going to come up here. You have the names. Go ahead, stand right here. You have the names in your program. Follow with me. Charles H. Wilson. Charlie cannot be here with us. Remarkably but perfectly, we actually don't have real ultimate confirmation of whether Charlie is still with us in body, but he is absolutely with us in spirit, in love, and in respect. Douglas D. Kana, Jr. You're supposed to come up here,
Put you here.
and I'll ask you to say hi to Bill and then come on down.
This is great. Here's the roll.
Oh, thanks. All right.
W. Wallace Pope Jr. Wally Pope is in Florida, and he desperately wanted to join us, but he couldn't. The Honorable John G. Codal. John, they love you. I asked them, but they wouldn't hold. Congratulations. Thank you. Doug, we need you up here. You were supposed to walk, but you were supposed to stop.
Stop.
Yeah. That tradition hasn't continued. William Pannell.
Thank you.
James W. McElhaney. Jim McElhaney is in New Mexico. I spoke with Penny and Jim a couple of months ago, and I spoke with Penny very recently. He sends his love, his regards, his deep, deep, deep appreciation, and his regret that he really can't join us today. If you hadn't had the opportunity to read the cover story in ABA Journal a couple of months ago, it's available online. It's a terrific remembrance of Jim's great work. Bart Schwartz, you heard Bart referred to. Bart helped knock out one incredible issue and then succumbed to the demands of life and practice. Gene McLean Snyder. Please have a seat, Gene, when you're ready.
A seat.
A seat.
Yeah, we don't have enough chairs.
A seat. Go all the way down. One editor-in-chief served twice, Christopher Lutz. Got him up there? Good.
I get two more minutes?
No, you don't.
There you go. This is good. Go ahead.
Come on down. You can sit or you can stand. It's up to Gene Snyder. Miriam Cass. So nice. Mark Neubauer. Kenneth P. Nolan. Doug, why don't you have a seat right here? Doug, have a seat right here. Thanks. Great. Terrific. Lawrence J. Velardo. We got close with Gary Sasso. He was not that many miles away, but his travel schedule just wouldn't permit him to join us. The Honorable Jeffrey Cole. We're not giving you back the microphone, though. Jeffrey, come sit down. Come sit down. Charles D. Tobin. That scattered applause must be my family because your family isn't here.
I'll take them.
Joyce S. Myers. Joyce brought us to new territory by introducing the one-time, I think, appearance of poetry in Litigation Journal. Joyce could not join us today. Stephen G. Good. For the best reason in the world, Steve's not here. He's in trial. Maria E. Rodriguez. And as you've heard, our current fearless leader, Robin Page West. Ladies and gentlemen, your friend, the section's friend, our friend, the editors-in-chief of the first 40 years of Litigation Journal.
Well, first of all, let me thank to Steve, who did all this with aided by Mike. Spectacular job, Steve. Everything is just great. Thank you. You know, it is I'm awed by the history of our flagship publication. Was struck by several things that were said, but you know, it led the way, and that's where we want to be as a section. That's where we want to continue to be as a publication. The challenges are always difficult for the section. The challenges are difficult for print publications, but I believe we'll be up to the task and continue to lead in the next 40 years.